I prepared a workshop kind of because event modeling is a way how to model a business domain clear or more specific. And to start with that, we just start into this event modeling. Event modeling starts with a brainstorming session usually, where we can include all the stakeholders of our business domain. So that means we can include designers there, we can include domain experts, we can include project managers and software developers to think about our specific domain we want to model and plan about, to just know more about what's going on in this domain, to later have a good understanding how to implement this system into a qualitative software. And so I chose actually to model our Paphos community website to just bring things closer. So what did I do now? I was first looking at some events, which are usually written in the past because it's a state change which has happened. This is something we need to clarify beforehand. So we now have some events, event created. In this context, event. In most contexts, I will talk about the orange sticky note as an event, but in this specific context now, the event is meant like the meetup event. So we can create an event, we can add comments, we can add participants, then we remove comments again maybe, or we can set event reminders. That's a feature I now added in this example, and we have this example maybe or the event reminder has been triggered. The second step we do is, this is now a bit small because this is in Miro, and we create a timeline and what's happening in our system. So this timeline is already a timeline of events which has to be logical for the people who are involving in the system. So when we read this timeline already, what state of changes are in our system is that we create an event, we add a participant, we add a comment, we can remove a comment, we can remove a participant, we can set an event reminder, we can trigger an event reminder, and the event in the end can be archived. And the moving part in this specific part of this workshop is the events. And as second, we already bring in all the visual learners and all the visual people in our system, so we just align them together. We can include them into our event model, which makes it pretty powerful already. So that means when we have designers in our workshop, they can just straight up sketch some mock-ups or something about what will happen in our UI. I took now screenshots from our website, as you see, and I think you all know and are familiar with this website. So that helps maybe because it's quite small now. So now we just put on what happens in the UI and put it above the event change. There we have the UI and UX part, and this not only has to be mockups, it can also be API REST endpoints. If you are more on the backend side, it can just be anything which an actor can trigger. It can also be an automated system, like here, for example, so just have a nice flow of events in our story later. After that, we add commands. Commands are basically the moving part of what will happen or what will change in our system. That's why we formulated in the future sense. That means when the event is created or a participant is added, the command usually which triggers that event or which brings our system to this state is the add participant command. Or when we follow through now, we have the add comment command, we have the set event reminder command, we have the trigger event reminder, the archive event. So through all the system and in all timeline. After that, we identify the outputs. If you're familiar with domain-driven design, you know that we should try to model our domain or our software as close as it gets to the actual domain. This is basically a short summary about domain-driven design. And there we have now these commands which triggers or which usually brings an aggregate towards the event, and this event usually involves an aggregate. What is an aggregate there now? An aggregate is like some data, or not some data, it's more like some, how to describe it now?
Say it in German.
Say it in German? I don't think it helps.
Someone else in German, something
Collection. Collection. No, it's more that we put some properties, like if you know about entities, aggregates are just equivalent from entities, but aggregates don't change. They always have an ID. So we pass around our system always the same aggregate, and we can build out of our views, out of our output events now, some projections, or with a projection we can produce our output here. So that means if we have now the create event command, which has the result of the event is created, then the projection would be to see what event details are now inside this event. If we continue now with the next step is we can bring our events into different contexts, into different kind of, it can be bounded contexts or just different groups, and there we can just identify pretty simple what contexts belong together. So when we have the first word event in each of our sticky note here, this is usually the group event, and if we have now here the participants in our group, then it is a participant, but that can also go to all other kinds of contexts. For example, when we have now authorization included or something, and we may have a swim lane for authorization, but for our example I kept it a bit trivial that we just have it here like that. And then we have also, like, we can put our automated systems out in their own swim lanes. We can, if we would have an admin panel or something, we can model an admin panel as its own group in the top. So now what we can see is kind of already our event model and what we've created for our specific system to just like see through what is happening from each system. So like this is basically this small text field to add a name into our into our form. And yeah, so that's basically it. We can follow nicely through each line to go through this event model. And this is pretty cool to have when we have a complex system now, that we can just easily navigate to what is actually going on in our system. Like the event model is forcing us now to think specifically about each event, what the approach of domain-driven design is doing and what it wants, but it's actually quite complicated to implement. And event modeling is now, as you see, we can just bring this into a nice workshop session where we introduce everyone within 10 minutes, 15 minutes what we have to think about. And while domain-driven design or event storming or something is something we really need to know about what it is. And this is very technical because there's this one book from domain-driven design out of 2002, and it's still up to date, it's still great, it's awesome. But it's a book. Has multiple hundreds of pages, like no one really reads it, right? So that's why the event modeling is created by Adam Dimitrick in around 2018, which is the result basically of all the history of software architecture, and brings it now together into a nice workshop format where we can include all the stakeholders around to just like display what's going on in our system. And if the project evolves, like I don't know if you had this as an experience or something, but in my experience is when we have a backlog with Jira tickets, it's pretty hard to onboard yourself into this new system. And that's why event modeling is basically the one artifact we need to develop a software now. We can work on that. If we have changes and made mistakes in the past, we just version this event model and correct it later on. So yeah, and after we now elaborated, we can create nice scenarios to Like it's usually following the given when then approach, which is especially good for unit testing, because now we can test through our code. We always have like what is given already, what is inside our system with what should the test start, then what will happen, which command is triggering a new outcome of our system. And there we have like two patterns usually. We have the state change and the state view. The state change is usually something which actually changes something in our system, and the state view is something to bring out of our system to the UI or to whatever someone needs it. And there are also like other patterns, for example, this translation pattern, which I didn't really include in our system because it's too trivial to model it. The translation system, the translation basically means that we bring another API or something else. For example, in this weather conditions, or in this example, I said maybe we can bring weather conditions or a weather API into our community Paphos events. So that means we get events from a certain API which does not really belong in our system. There are different data, and that's why we have this translation mechanism where we model this automation process here to bring it into a command which then translates into an aggregate we can use in our system. So that's the translation pattern, and the automation pattern is something when we trigger something. Here, for example, the event details we have, and which triggers, what's it called? The event reminder, for example, because the event reminder is set. And then we have a new state event reminder. Just for you, so for the information, usually notifications are not modeled in this because usually you model states which actually changes our behavior in our system, which needs to be modeled. But in this case, I took it as an example where we just document whenever we have maybe a notification in our WhatsApp group or something. And then we just track it in our system. If we now look into a less trivial example, we can see like already 3 bounded contexts. Like I zoomed it in already because it's quite huge. It is an example from the Exonic framework website, because they make good tools and good learnings about it. But nevertheless, like we have here the bounded context about account management, the inventory management, and here's the booking system management. So we use here now the translation pattern to bring it into our system, and here too. And what we can also do is, like, we do not need to bring for different bounded contexts different models. We can just bring it into one model, where we just bring it into our swim lanes at the bottom. And that is pretty cool and handy that we just work on one domain model, or one event model. That's all we need. And then what event modeling is approaching is event sourcing there. Event sourcing is a pattern where we always have an append-only event store or stream. So we document actually what is going on in our system, and there comes CQRS in play, which means command query responsibility segregation, where we then can bring commands into our write database, and we query from our read database. So there we have this eventual inconsistent state, which is completely different behavior from a normal traditional REST API or REST approach or something. It's like a complete different way of thinking, and that's what makes it cool when we use now event modeling, that when we implement something like a command, the event and the projection, that we do not need to change it later anymore. And when we use a traditional system, we usually refactor over and over what's going on. And that brings us basically this traditional or this cost curve, where we do not really know how long a new feature will take, which is pretty shit for project management, right? Because project management wants to know, like, how long does it actually know now? Like, how much time do we need to implement our new feature? And project management doesn't think with refactoring. That's like just the nature how they think, because they have no idea about the code, what's going on. And that's like, we can also make chunks. We have now our implementation. This is now more the project management side, where we can create chunks of things we can implement as a team. We can create teams for different swim lanes, or if it's just a small project, it's like one's doing it all, right? And we can basically easily predict how long the project will last after the first few agile cycles. And this is pretty cool to use this in agile development too, because as we see now here, we have a new feature now in this example where we have this verification email, or the old system is we just register an account in our database, and our new feature should be that we need a verification code or something into our verification mail. We can maybe look first at the traditional approach, where we just bring our account data into the database straight away, and then when we want to implement this new feature, we need to refactor our database, our backend again, to then implement the new feature. And there's this refactoring inside, which takes time. And I don't know if you have ever experienced it. To refactor a database is not fun. It's really much a pain. And that's why, like, because the database only represents the current state of what we actually need. While the event sourcing approach is that we just have an event store where we store all the events, where we have a single source of truth inside, because out of this event store we can always create our new projection to display what we have now in our system. And these projections each have its own database, actually. That means we can easily see, and we do not actually need the database. We can also destroy it. We can just build a new one, and because we can all identify it or create it out of our event history. And what we do here now is we just add, for example, this new feature and model a new command in, which now is mark verification email as sent. We save the verification email sent into the event store. We have the code verification out of our event, and which then a user can type into this UI again, and which then triggers a command to verify the account, and then our system is, the account is verified. So in our system now we do not need to refactor anything, we just add on more features. That's what agile development should be about, to just think about new features. And yeah, this is like how the event model approach helps us also refactor new or adding new features into our system. So yeah, this was basically the presentation from me now. And this is my LinkedIn QR code. I don't think it works here because it's so pixelated, but feel free to connect with me. Yeah, like I'm also currently looking for a job, like maybe in this field. If you know something who wants to work with event sourcing or event modeling or something, then feel free to hit me up, and then we can also summarize this again into one sentence. Event modeling is a collaborative approach, and a collaborative and visual technique for representing the behavior and interactions of a system, capturing events, commands, and views to facilitate shared understanding and guide the development process. So there, with this approach, we just involve everyone. We do not need unnecessary Jira tickets. We do not need to write anything. We just have it all visualized, and the designers can switch up the mockups and so on, so everything keeps up to date. Like, we all only need to work on this event model. And I think here are some quick links if you want. There's the most approach, or the most famous website for event modeling is eventmodeling.org. It's founded by this Adam. And which is also pretty good is the Axon framework. They made pretty good stuff about event sourcing and CQRS, because Axon framework is basically the framework exactly for it. But since event modeling or event sourcing is so little used and so hard to understand, because it's so much different of the traditional approach, which is just like easy, like we have a CRUD application, a REST API, and everything goes synchronously or something. This event sourcing goes asynchronously completely. So yeah, if you want to look or learn more about it, then I would recommend you to look at these links. Well, this GitHub repository, actually, I found it recently. It's pretty cool. He has like projects for himself in the way of Kanban, I think, where he just self-improve in different things. So definitely something to check out if you just want to copy a learning process of someone about event sourcing or different kind of things. So yeah, that was it. And do you have any questions, like things you don't understand?
Share this in the group, right?
Yeah, I share the complete Miro just into the group.
Presentation if you'd like, but definitely links, that would be very...
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I mean, it's just a Miro board. We can just keep on adding. We can also like just use this Miro board to implement our system if we want to. I don't know if it's over-engineered or something, or maybe it's just well thought in the beginning and then simpler in the end, because we just keep on adding features, which is usually happen in our system. We don't know what's going on and what will happen into the future, what people need. And that's why event modeling is awesome.